ZBrush has a great feature called Project, which allows you to take one surface and shrink wrap it onto another. It's usually used as a way to get detail from a scan or rough sculpt onto a version of the model that has been retopologized. The feature allows you to project shape alone or shape with color. But what if you want to just project color alone? In this video, I'll show you how. So let's see what we've got in this scene. Open up my subtools here. And so we've got one model in here called Scan. Let me zoom in so you can see what this is. I'm going to hit Shift F to turn on wireframe. So you can see it's messy scan data. It's just a lot of triangles just kind of mashed together, giving you the overall shape. It's also got some flaws in it, like holes where the scanner didn't quite catch everything. But it has a texture map, and I'm going to hit Shift F to turn off wireframe. And now we've got a second version of this. And this is a version that has been cleaned up somewhat. It's got the holes filled, and it's got some of the extra detail worked into the model, but it doesn't have any color. And let's actually compare this to the scan again. If we turn off the texture map, here under texture map, we can turn off this texture map, and you can see that the amount of detail in this version isn't as clean as the amount of detail that we got in this version. You can see a definite difference there in the amount of detail. So when we use Project to shrink wrap this model onto this model, we don't actually want to pick up the lower definition of detail. We want to keep all this nice, finer, sharper detail. Okay, let's go back to the original scan with the texture map. I'm going to turn texture map back on. Now, one thing is that this color information is in a texture map, which you can see right here, but it's not in Polypainting. So what we need to do is get this texture map into Polypaint. So let's go to the Polypaint menu, and let's get the Polypaint from texture. So converting that texture into Polypainting. Now there's actually one glitch there. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. We need to make sure that we're in RGB mode to do that. So Polypaint from texture again. Let's try that. All right, much better. Now, a lot of times you might need to subdivide this model more because Polypaint is dependent on the resolution of the mesh to convert that texture map into Polypainting. So if I hit Control Z to undo that, you can see that we're kind of losing some of that definition, that texture, as I go back and forth between undoing and redoing. So let's actually subdivide this model so that we have more polygons to work with. I'm just going to hit Control D. And let's just do it one more time for good measure. Control D to subdivide it again. Now when we Polypaint from texture, we're picking up a lot more of that texture information. All right, I'm going to hit F to zoom out. Okay, now let's go in our subtool back up to the cleaned version. So the version we want to put that color information onto. And what I want to do is store a morph target. So I can always come back to the way this model is shaped, exactly as it is now. So we'll go to morph target and click store morph target. Okay, now to project the shape and the color information from the textured version to the untextured version. So we'll go to subtool, we'll go to project, and just go ahead and click project all. Okay, let's see what we got. So it looks like it projected pretty well. It didn't do those areas where there's a hole because obviously there's nothing to project from there, but it got the color information just fine. So that looks great. Now, one thing I want to do is temporarily hide that Polypainting. So let's go into the Polypaint menu here and turn off Colorize, just temporarily hide that. And actually I'm going to go into solo mode so that we're not seeing that other subtool poking through. So after the projection, we actually lost all that fine detail. It went back to the more smoothed out rough version from the rough scan. So we want to go to Morph Target and restore what this shape looked like before we projected. So switch, it goes back to where it was before. And now we can bring that color back by going to the Polypaint menu here and turn Colorize back on. Okay, there you have it. Color projected from one model to another. Now, of course, you're going to want to do some cleanup painting and cleanup sculpting to these areas where there were holes in the original scan. But for the most part, we got some nice stuff to work with. Some good color information and some good surface detail as well.